Just go to your EPA, go to your hometown, and do an EPA analysis of your water. I live in Fairhope, Alabama. There's 16 toxins in our water here that are acceptable. 6 of them are above the threshold of cancer, but are acceptable on EPA standards. So we have an entire whole house water filter system, and we have reverse osmosis in our kitchen. I want to reduce the toxins. I want to reduce the heavy metals. I want to reduce the antibiotics. So it plays into how we fix you, whatever your symptoms are. And then the third part is, back to my lifestyle, the other part of that is trying to reduce your stress load. If you're in a crazy job, I traveled. 140 times one year on an airplane when I was doing this travel medicine. It's pretty stressful. I like to fly, but it was still pretty stressful. So if I felt stressed, somebody may say, well, maybe you should be on the plane 140 times. Somebody's got to bring that up. Oftentimes it's an outsider that identifies that. And then the other part of lifestyle is sleep. We know without a doubt your brain needs to reset. What's the magic number for hours of sleep? It's a little bit different from everybody, but for men, it's around 7 to 8 hours of consistent sleep. And for women, it's more than that. It's 8 to 9. So if all of a sudden you're 45 years old and you're not sleeping well and you go to a family doctor, oftentimes they'll say, well, you must be depressed. And you get put on an antidepressant. And nobody ever thinks or talks about, I shouldn't use the word nobody, many practices never say to a woman, I wonder if we check your hormones, if your hormones are out of whack, maybe that's our problem. And so that would be a scenario, again, where you're talking to the patient and trying to figure out what's going on. The third part is activity. Now, interesting word about activity. As an athlete, I love to go to the gym. I love to ride my bike. But my wife doesn't. She likes to garden, and she likes to be outside, and she likes to camp. Activity, right? So it's not like you have to be in the gym, on the treadmill, lifting weights. Activity means your body's moving. And the interesting thing is they've looked at this with older people. 3 things can help you age healthier: lifestyle, diet, and activity. Functional medicine. So lifestyle, you have sleep that we talked about. Lifestyle, diet, you try to get whole foods in your diet. And activity. The interesting thing is you can increase your age by up to 5 years by being active 35 minutes per week. That's 5 minutes a day. And you say, well, everybody does that. No. Oftentimes patients retire and then they retire. And then they go to so they get up in the morning and they go to their chair and they stay in their chair all day long and then they go back to bed. And so 5 minutes a day can increase your longevity. But it's not just increasing your longevity. We want you to be healthy as you age.
So I want to go back to the diet part of this in relation to hormones. So as women, we know menopause. Most women know that, okay, I'm not releasing eggs anymore. My estrogen's decreasing, but you haven't talked a lot about testosterone. And specifically for women that maybe aren't in menopause yet, why would a woman come in feeling exhausted? You draw her labs, her testosterone's in the toilet. What could she maybe do if she doesn't want to go on hormone replacement therapy yet? Is there something that she can do to get her testosterone up? Is it possible?
So trying to understand. So first of all, we have to have baseline understanding of what hormones are. So women produce 3 hormones: estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Now, I started with estrogen because in my entire career as an OBGYN, estrogen has been, in my mind, the predominant hormone for women. So then I get into the functional medicine world and I identify that it's not estrogen that should be or is the dominant hormone in women. It's testosterone. And so I have been educated, and it's amazing. I've been out 30 years. I went to college, med school, residency, and I realized 30 years after my career that testosterone is the dominant hormone in women. And women look at me with big eyes and say, testosterone, isn't that a man's hormone? Yes, it is. But it's also a woman's hormone. In fact, it should be the dominant hormone. Great story. So a woman's 25 years old. She has all kinds of energy. She's been recently married. She has sex every night. Life is great. If you look at her testosterone when she's 25 in that scenario, it can be up to 25 times higher than her estrogen. Never, I hate to use words like never, but I'm going to say never does that woman sit in her chair at night after she's had sex or her bed and say, oh my gosh, I've got too much testosterone because I'm having sex every night. I have all kinds of energy. I can lift weights. I'm scared I'm going to grow a beard, grow a deep voice, and grow a penis. Never Does she think that way? And then she goes 20 years into the future and she comes into my office and I said, okay, let's talk about testosterone. You're in your 40s. We're going to do some blood work, but we're specifically going to talk about testosterone. And she gets big eyes and she gets, whoa, testosterone, isn't that a man's hormone? And immediately in her mind, she's going to grow a beard, get a deep voice, and grow a penis. I said, no. Let's talk about testosterone. So let's talk about these three hormones. So as you go into your reproductive life, you're made for one reason, to have babies. And again, that's not a sexist statement. That's the biology. In fact, if you don't have babies, our Earth goes away in one generation, right? So biologically, you're made to have babies. So you have an estrogen that needs to produce an egg, then you ovulate, and then you have a decrease in your estrogen, then you have an elevated progesterone that keeps the baby alive until the placenta takes over at about the 8th week. But what about testosterone in that role? Well, testosterone is kind of important for driving the experience, okay? If I remove your testosterone, maybe you have sex, but maybe you're not interested in it at all. And so you need testosterone. You also need testosterone for your muscles and for your spine. And it's very important in your brain. And so you need all three. And so nobody really talks about that. And then you move forward in your life. And now you're 30 or 35 or 40. And all of a sudden you have brain fog and you have no energy and you have fatigue. Back to you have children. And all of a sudden your fatigue is dramatically lower than it was a year ago, and you have the same number of children. Why am I so fatigued? So we draw a panel of labs at that point. So again, I've listened to your history. I have an idea what's going on. We've talked about your diet, your activity, your sleep, and try to make sure that we're identifying all the functional medicine aspects of it. And then we get a panel of labs, and we call them the Well Woman Labs. I love that name. And it's a CBC, so it's a complete blood count. So we know, hey, are you anemic because you're 40 years old and you're having crazy uterine bleeding? We do a metabolic profile. I need to make sure that your sodium, your potassium, your liver enzymes are fine. Make sure your blood sugar is not elevated. I check your ferritin. That tells me if there's inflammation in your body and how well your bone marrow is working. I check your complete thyroid panel. So this is a transparent statement here. In my entire career, never did I order a thyroid antibody until a year and a half ago. I don't know why I did. But we're not educated that way. We're educated that you check a TSH and a free T4, and then we diagnose hypothyroidism in women, and we put them on Synthroid. That's a standard treatment across the country. So in the functional medicine world, hey, no, you need to do a whole panel. So TSH, free T4, free T3, and a TPO. And then we also check a vitamin D. 99.999% of our patients are low in vitamin D. Now, I want to talk about vitamin D because vitamin D is, when the value comes back, it's on a range, and every lab has a range. So vitamin D is normal range from 30 to 100. And so I had a patient today, she was 31. I also had another patient today, she was 14. So many doctors would say, okay, the patient with 31, you're a normal range, you're fine. Patient with 14, well, you're a little bit low. So take 1,000 international units, maybe 2,000 international units of vitamin D, and let's try to get you up. But they don't recheck it, and vitamin D goes up very slowly. And they don't talk about being out in the sun because it's hours of UV radiation. That's a trivia question. What's the only vitamin that you make? Vitamin D, right? And how do you make it? Sitting out in the sun.
Or eating a lot of cholesterol.
Yes. So we check a vitamin D. 99.999% of our patients are low. And that's just not our patients. That's everywhere in the world. And then a B12 level. And we, again, use optimal levels. And 95%, probably 98% of all of our patients are suboptimal in B12. And then we check a testosterone level and a free testosterone level, an estrogen level, specifically estradiol. There's 3 estrogens, E1, E2, and E3. We check E2, which is estradiol. And then we check an FSH to identify where you are in the menopause state. And then I have you come back and we go over all of these. And this will be a classic scenario. I'm going to go over your labs. Now, you're 32 years old, and I would expect your CBC to be normal unless you have crazy heavy bleeding. If you have heavy, crazy bleeding, then we need to investigate because as a 32-year-old, what's the most logical explanation? Uterine bleeding. So we would get a further history. Hey, are your periods heavy? Now, for you, they may be completely normal. I've always had this. So it's not out of the ordinary for you, but your anemia shows different. So we would do an ultrasound on you and then talk to you about uterine ablation if you're done having babies, okay? Then we check your we'll go over your metabolic profile. You're slender, so I don't expect you to have diabetes But if you had an elevated blood sugar, then I would do a fasting blood sugar, and then I would do a hemoglobin A1C. Okay. I then move into the vitamin D. So vitamin D, again, 99.99% of our patients are low, and I'm going to recommend that you spend more time out in the sun and that you take, again, I'm going to use both of these examples on these patients. The patient with 31, I'm going to have her take vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin K. The vitamin D I'm going to give her is 10,000 international units. So we have BioT has a nutraceutical called ADK10, and I'm going to put her on ADK10, have her take it every night, and then I'm going to recheck her value in 3 months. Because remember, it's a slow rise. The patient was 14 today. I'm going to put her on 20,000 international units of vitamin D. So I'll have her take an ADK10 from BioT, and then I'll have her take another vitamin D that she can buy from Amazon. On B12, I do two things. So value today, 486. I want the patient to be 1,200. And again, the range, I want to be optimal. When you're sitting there talking to a patient and you tell a patient that they're fine with 486 on their B12, I would say back to the doctor, well, fine didn't get you into medical school, right? If you had C averages, which is the bell-shaped curve, that means 80% of the population fall in there, you would be fine. You'd be a C student. Well, you would have never gone to medical school. You had to be optimal. So why aren't we educating our patients to be optimal? And so B12, I would want you in optimal range. It's very hard to get your B12 up. You've got to eat animal products, livers, hearts. People aren't going to do that. So we give B12 injections. Interesting story. My father, 50 years ago, when a woman was going into menopause, or a man, every person over the age of 60 got B12 injections every single month. Now, they didn't do blood work. They just knew that what people needed B12. So in the morning, he'd have 10 patients lined up, boom, 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 give them all their B12, see you next month. Charge $3 for that. A lot more expensive than today. But we give B12 injections. Some patients come in every single month, but I also give prescriptions. I give a 10 cc vial. You take 1 cc every month. And if you feel comfortable giving it or having a family member giving it, then we give B12. And again, we want the optimal range.